Adam Marcus on the Fishbowl. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good. Thank you so much for taking the time to swim in the bowl with me.
Happy to do so, brother.
Thanks. I hope the temperature is just right.
Well, it'll be perfect for today because it's a little warm outside out here in L.A.
Okay. I wish we had some of that weather here in Pittsburgh because, as usual, it's typical Pittsburgh weather. We're now in early May, and I still have the heat on in my car.
Wow, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. It's just a little over 80 today in L.A.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I was out there going on 3 Octobers ago for Shriek Fest. One of my actually two of my screenplays made it in. One they eliminated like in the final round, and then the other one made it as a finalist. I didn't win, but it was like a really cool experience.
That's awesome, dude. Love it.
But my first question for you
is
what got you interested in film?
Well, my whole family were pretty much in the business in some way or another. So a lot of actors and filmmakers already in the family. My uncle Ned, you'll probably recognize, Ned Eisenberg. He was Eddie in The Burning.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. And Ned's been a journeyman actor for the last 40 years. He's one of those ultimate that guys. The minute you see him, you're like, oh, I know that guy. You know, he's that guy. And then my other uncle, Joe Ellison, he wrote, directed, and produced the film Don't Go in the House. So, which was a classic slasher that came out the same year as Friday the 13th. In fact, I have these great photographs of theaters on 42nd Street in Manhattan, showing that as a double bill, Friday the 13th and Don't Go in the House. So I had some horror street cred to start with. And my best friend in the world was this guy, Noel Cunningham, who was the son of Sean S. Cunningham. And we were best friends since the time we were 8. So I was always there. I was always in their home. I was there when they made Friday the 13th. I was there when they made A Stranger's Watching, House, Spring Break. I actually apprentice edited under Susan Cunningham, Noel's mother, Sean's ex-wife, who recently left us a year and a half ago. And so I was her apprentice on that movie. I was I think 12 or 13 when I worked on that, which is an incredibly inappropriate movie for a 12 or 13-year-old to work on, because it's literally like wall-to-wall boobs, that movie. So I always like to say I walked into that movie as a boy and left it as a man. And, I have a similar story as far as the impetus for all of this as a lot of people from my generation. I was 9 years old on the second day of release of the original Star Wars, of A New Hope. And the moment the Imperial Star Destroyer, floated overhead chasing the Tantive 4, I turned to my father and I just said, I want to do that. And I think he thought I wanted to be an astronaut when it was like, no, I want to make that happen.
Right.
On the screen. So in my mid-teens, I created my first of 3 theater companies that I owned and operated from the time I was 15 to 21. And I had the rarest of rare experiences, which was I had a theater company that made money. And I was able to go to NYU Film School because of it. I was able to make my films while I was there. I left film school and came to LA, and I was debt free. And that was all from doing, live theater back east in New York and Connecticut. And so that's sort of how it all started. But, I won Best Picture at NYU for a romantic comedy called So You Like This Girl. The 2 leads of that movie, by the way, were, I don't know if you're a fan of Reno 911, but Tom Lennon, the creator of the show, and the guy who plays Officer Dangle with short shorts and the mustache.
Absolutely.
Tom and I have been friends since we were in college, and he played the lead of my film, and the second lead of the film was Joe Latruglio, who is Andy Samberg's partner on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So I had this incredible cast of actors for this little movie that I made. And that got me 2 offers. One, to write for season 2 of Twin Peaks from David Lynch and Mark Frost. And the other offer was from my old boss, Sean Cunningham. who was like, come to LA, be my bitch for a year, and I'll give you your shot. And I came out to LA carrying a script that my best friend from college, a guy named Dean Laurie, had written called Johnny Zombie that I'd been workshopping for about 3 years with him. And we ended up setting up that movie at Disney. I was an associate producer on that film when I was 21. It ended up being called My Boyfriend's Back. It got Disneyfied. That's the sadness of that one. But because I had done all that, I came to Sean. I said, great, I just made you a shit ton of money at Disney. Give me a movie. And Sean looked me dead in the face and said, okay, cool. He said, Adam, you're the world's biggest nudge. It's your superpower. I said, great. What's my movie? He said, Paramount is selling the rights to Jason Voorhees to New Line. And if you can figure out a way to get that fucking hockey mask out of the movie, I'll let you write and direct. And that was it. I was off and running. That was, I delivered a treatment 3 days later. And by the time I was 22, I'd been hired officially by New Line and Cunningham Productions. And 23, I shot the movie.
Awesome. Now, I have like a lot of questions
Sure.
about the whole film and the process for it as well, because I went to school in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh for screenwriting, and I'm very curious as like from the writer's perspective, where did like the concepts draw to do the entry that came to be?
The biggest situation, I was handed a series of problems. And that's kind of where the writing started, was I was given a bunch of landmines that I couldn't step on. So, one, get the fucking hockey mask out of the movie. Okay, so now we have a franchise that is built for the last, half dozen movies on that mask. However, my producer is the guy who made the first movie and only the first movie. It had nothing to do with the other films. He thought making movies about Jason Voorhees was idiotic. Okay, he didn't want to make movies about Jason Voorhees. He, much like the person he ripped off, John Carpenter, he wanted what John wanted. John Carpenter wanted to make movies about Halloween. He didn't want to make movies about Michael Myers. Sean Cunningham wanted to make movies about things that happen on the most unlucky day of the year, Friday the 13th. He didn't want to make movies about Jason Voorhees. His film isn't about Jason Voorhees. It's about Pamela Voorhees, a mother who's lost her child and is seeking revenge on people who did nothing wrong to her child. So Sean hated Sackhead Jason, thought it was just stupid and just a dumb ripoff of the Elephant Man, which it was. And then he really hated the hockey mask, thought it made no fucking sense. He did not get it at all. By the way, this is also a man who didn't understand Nightmare on Elm Street and turned Wes down when Wes asked Sean to produce that movie. So we're not talking about, Nostradamus here, but he didn't dig it. So I wasn't allowed to have the hockey mask, or at least I had to figure out how to get it out of the movie. I then found out after I had started writing, because my initial treatment was about Tommy Jarvis. And then I found out, oh, no, you can't have Tommy Jarvis. Why? We bought the rights. We bought the rights to everything from the first screenplay and the hockey mask. They couldn't even use the title Friday the 13th. They owned Jason. That's what they owned. So now I can't use any of the characters that happened after part one. That's all I got. So I'm a little stuck. The other thing is everybody, Paramount, New Line, Sean, everyone hated Part 8. Everybody hated the movie. So I was told, ignore the events of Part 8. Start from Part 7. So as a screenwriter, when you're handed a bunch of don't do that, you start going, okay, I better start thinking really far outside this box. And I did. And that's where, look, my biggest problem with the Friday the 13th franchise has always been, and this is from when I was a little kid, in part one, you have Ari Lehman drowning in the movie as Jason in the 50s. Then 1980 rolls around and Ari Lehman is still jumping out of the pond. Okay, so Ari Lehman's coming out of Crystal Lake. Attacking Alice, dragging her down. Well, that's a child. I went to school with Ari. I know Ari. Ari was a child. So between part one and part two is 2 weeks. That's not a joke. That's how long it is between those two movies. So suddenly Jason has magically grown 2 feet, put on 120 extra pounds, has clothed himself, found some way to learn how to read because he obviously went to the Yellow Pages to find out where Alice lived, went to her house, carried Mom's head, and somehow got a car because he had to bring Alice's body back to Crystal Lake to put in his shrine. How'd that all happen? I mean, I saw a little boy at the end of part 1. Now there's a full-grown man by part 2, and it's 2 weeks apart.
Right.
So okay, so that's a problem. Then as you progress through the movies, you've got a guy who takes more abuse than any human body could ever take, ever. He survives up to part 4, and at the end of part 4, Tommy Jarvis turns this guy's head to hamburger meat. He doesn't hit him once. He doesn't hit him twice. He hits him dozens of times with a machete. He destroys this guy. Great. Part 5, it's Roy. So the only thing that's ridiculous about part 5 is that literally Roy has a photograph of Jason in his wallet. And I just go, who took the photo? The Blair Witch kids before they died? So part 6 rolls around. Now you've got a Frankenstein story where Frankenstein's monster is resurrected through electricity. Now he's zombie Jason, which I always love. Like, now the fans go like, ooh, now he's a mystical creature. I go, wait, what was he in the last 4 movies, guys?
Right.
Okay. So here's the thing. If we're going to take all of those ideas and forget about 7 and 8, as it gets even more crazy when Paramount runs out of ideas and they're like, I know what, we've done Frankenstein. Now let's do Jason versus Carrie. How about Jason versus the entire island of Manhattan and guys with bandanas and boomboxes? By the next film, if Paramount had kept making them, it would have been like, how about Jason versus Godzilla? So, this is where this series was going. So for me, I was going, okay, I am a huge fan of this series of movies. I love all of them. They are all like the most fun you can have at the movies. So I grew up on these movies. I adore them. My problem is none of it makes sense. There's no logic behind it. And as a storyteller, look, there are storytellers who are totally cool with never having any logic, and God bless them. There are filmmakers out there that have made a living on telling you stories that you cannot track from point A to point B in any way that makes logical sense. I'm not that guy. That drives me crazy. So I immediately said, okay, Jason is magical. That's it. Like, there's a monster there. We're not dealing with a human being. We're not dealing with a little boy who drowned in a lake. That's all nonsense. That's the opening salvo of this story. So how do I create a mythology that will now kind of fix the franchise from a logic standpoint? I look at my movie now in retrospect. I'm sort of the Rogue One of the Friday the 13th franchise. Because in A New Hope, we were all so thrilled with the movie and so starry-eyed. But the truth is, when you go back, you go, wait a minute. Why is there a 2-meter hole in the Death Star that someone can just shoot something into and blow up the whole fucking thing? Who the hell would do that? What kind of weird exhaust engine is that? And, of course, Rogue One explains that 2-meter hole, that problem. It's literally the only reason that movie exists. And it's an awesome movie. It's, the Saving Private Ryan of the Star Wars franchise. But it's also something that helps make these movies make logical sense. So my thought was Necronomicon. Now, New Line didn't own Evil Dead, and they weren't going to own Evil Dead. So I had been working with Bob Kurtzman. I had been on the set of Army of Darkness a couple times with K&B, and I asked Bob, can we talk to Sam, and can I borrow the Book of the Dead for the movie? And he was like, yeah, it should be great. Let's go do it. So he and I go off and talk to Sam, and Sam hands me the Book of the Dead in a Ziploc bag. That is not a joke. Here's the thing. Pamela Voorhees was obsessed with her son. She would do anything to save her Jason. Anything. To resurrect her Jason. To bring that boy back into her life. It was what her entire life was, what it revolved around. And if that woman would do anything, wouldn't she turn to the dark arts? And if you turn to the dark arts, you're going to find some kind of way to resurrect your child. Well, what a tragic story it is if Pamela gets her hands on the Necronomicon, goes to resurrect her child from Crystal Lake, and instead her child, because he is mentally damaged, because this is a handicapped child, that boy wakes up at the bottom of the lake, and there he is in this home. in this place that he is terrified of, that is all he knows. And there he is for decades, waiting for mommy to come get him. Mommy, of course, is waiting in our world, waiting for Jason to come home, and he doesn't. And then when Pamela finally goes back to Crystal Lake and starts murdering these teenagers on this Friday the 13th, her son witnesses her death from his watery grave. And that's what brings him back. And that's what makes him kill Alice. And the spirit, the demon of vengeance that he now is, can shapeshift, can change, can grow 2 feet in 2 weeks, can have all of these things happen. So suddenly, if you're now dealing with, whether it's a revenant or a deadite, you're dealing with something that is hell's assassin. And that creature doesn't live by our rules. That creature can change, and that creature can take tremendous abuse and somehow come back. And so suddenly I have a movie about a villain that now makes sense to me. On the other side of things, I was a guy who grew up with these movies, and we started out as kids watching these films. Well, now I'm in my early mid-20s, and I'm going, okay, the rest of the audience is like me. They're either my age or much older than I am. So isn't it time we started telling stories not about teenagers, but about, people, other people? We've seen a ton of teenagers get slaughtered by Jason. Great. But wouldn't it be more interesting to tell a story about a town of people that have lived with this monster for so long? And speaking of that, you have a guy who's killed over 100 people in a mile radius. Okay, that's no longer a local law enforcement issue. That's a federal issue. So the opening of the film had to be this federal sting to get Jason Voorhees. And the stories are legendary. And there have been several final girls that have survived. So they know the rules of Jason. They know what he goes after. They know this story. So the feds finally set a honey trap, which is Julie Michaels' character, and they go and get him. And they blow his ass up. No one's going to let that guy go. The fun of it is that Creighton Duke, who his backstory is that he lost his childhood sweetheart on Crystal Lake to Jason and has been stalking Jason ever since. That guy knows what Jason really is. He's the one who's done the research. He's lived an entire life waiting to take this guy down, and he knows that he is created from something from the netherworld. And that's why he has the information to take him down. So he knows right off the bat, I don't think so. So that sort of sets the pieces in place. Again, the Stephen Freeman character, played by John D. LeMay, was initially supposed to be Tommy Jarvis. So that character now lives in his own shoes, but it's still very much a tribute to the Tommy Jarvis character, who, my feeling about that was, once you kill Jason, then what do you do? Like, what's act 2 of your life? And that was sort of what I was playing on. So instead, Stephen is this guy who's kind of stuck in high school, still sort of, a bit of a loser. He's charming. He's lovely. He's a smart guy. He fell in love with a girl, got her pregnant, and she ran, not knowing that she's got this curse family that she ends up with. And so, look, the first movie is about a mother who loses her son. My movie, to bookend it, since it's the final Friday, or at least supposed to be the final Friday, my movie was about a father who finds his daughter. And that's why we built it that way. So from a story perspective, those are sort of the underpinnings of the story I was trying to tell.
Awesome. Now, I heard that there's going to be a director's cut coming out. And I've seen the footage on YouTube with the alternate ending. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering what was the Freddy thing. Where did that concept come from? And was that initially the whole setup for what would be Freddy versus Jason in the making? Okay,
a couple things. One, an official director's cut is not coming out.
Okay.
I can't definitively tell you what's going on.
Okay.
I can just tell you that something great is coming. It is not my cut of the film, but it's still pretty badass. So that's awesome. What I can also tell you is, we're right now I'm in the middle of shooting. Of course, the pandemic has put a pause button on us, but I am in the middle of, my company is making Hearts of Darkness, The Making of the Final Friday, which is the definitive documentary on this movie and on what happened. And it goes into warts and all, that's for sure. So both of those things are happening. What I can tell you about the ending of the movie, Freddy grabbing Jason, this is how that happened. So much like the Necronomicon, one of the things I was fascinated about when I was making the movie was when I was a little kid, there was nothing ever cooler than when you're watching an episode of Scooby-Doo and suddenly Batman is on it. Batman on Scooby-Doo blew my little mind. Because, and by the way, then like a few weeks later, the fucking Harlem Globetrotters were on Scooby-Doo. So suddenly I was like, wait a second. So all of these characters live in the same universe? Like they're all in the same place? And yes, they were. Like that was evidence of those shows. So for me, one of the things that's annoying about horror films, and of course Scream, this is what the entire Scream series is based on, but one of the annoying things in horror movies is that nobody has ever seen a horror movie. I mean, everybody makes the dumb, worst choices ever because they don't know that horror movies exist. So my thought was, okay, what if all of these movies exist in the same world where there is no horror movies, where their horror movies are something else, and they don't know Michael Myers or Leatherface. They don't know any of this stuff. So I kept trying to find ways to create a shared universe inside of the makings of Jason Goes to Hell. It's why there's Creepshow references, why there's references to the movie The Birds, why, of course, The Evil Dead is present. But I was hanging out with my roommates, which was Dean Lorre, the guy who wrote the script with me, and Noel Cunningham, who was one of the editors on the film. They were my roommates, and they were getting stoned to the bejesus while I was not, because I don't partake and I never have. And I was trying, and we were all laughing our asses off, and I was trying to come up with what other references and worlds can we collide into this soup that is Jason Goes to Hell. And suddenly I went, wait a second, doesn't New Line own outright Freddy? Don't they own every part of Freddy? Isn't that just New Line's? And, Dean was like, yeah, I think so. I said, oh, dude, I have the best idea for our ending. I know what our ending is. Now, they had just sent Freddy to hell. Or Freddy had died. And of course, if Freddy died, Freddy's going to hell. We knew we were going to send Jason to hell, but I thought, who better to usher Jason into hell than Freddy Krueger? So I call my two executives on the film, Mike DeLuca and Mark Ordesky, both like fucking amazing guys. And I call them up. This was at night. And I said, hey, can I have Freddy's glove and Robert's laugh? And they were immediately like, what do you want it for? And I told them what would be the ending of Jason Goes to Hell. They could not have said yes faster. Like, they were out of their minds. And it's funny because you think of, the Necronomicon getting handed to me in a Ziploc baggie. Freddy's glove came with an armed guard. It was like a completely different set of rules around these icons. So they bring the glove. I shoot that ending. Now, the reason that I know this story so well is because I've had to recount it several times because there was a writer that sued Mark Ordesky saying that he had pitched my ending to Mark. Mark gave it to me and I shot it. And nothing could be further from the truth. So much so when Mark came to me, he didn't tell me he was getting sued. He said, Adam, do you remember how the whole ending of the movie came up? And I said, sure. And I told the story that I just told you. And he was like, great. Will you say that in court? I was like, yeah, why? What the fuck's up? He said, we're being sued by some scumbag who's pretending he wrote your ending. I'm like, no. So here's the thing. While New Line, I'm sure, had designs on putting Freddy and Jason together in a movie called Freddy vs. Jason, that was not in my world. That's not something I was talked about with, not until after the film was done. And then they came to me to get a take and all that stuff. But no, dude, Freddy vs. Jason was not part of what New Line told me to work into the movie. It just didn't happen. So I brought Freddy into the movie because I thought this is the ending as a fan that I would lose my fucking mind over if they did this. And then I went and did it, and the audience lost their fucking mind over it. So that's where it came from.
Awesome. Well, one thing I wanted to say in relation to, and then I had a question that is related to this and everything.
Sure.
The thing I wanted to say was, it's funny that Freddy essentially makes a cameo in it at the end because personally I always thought of Part 9 of the Friday the 13th franchise as kind of like the new Nightmare in the franchise because it's a lore movie versus a straight up slasher sequel.
Yep.
And me as a screenwriter and things that I take influences from, I really like lore movies. And it's funny that you mentioned Necronomicon and everything because I wrote like an unofficial sequel to the Necronomicon 90s movie.
That's awesome, dude.
It's like 3 original brand new stories, and I don't know if you'd be interested in reading it or anything, but I'd love to send it to you and get your thoughts or something.
Sure,
if you're interested.
Sure, I would take a look. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much. But back to the movie and everything. I thought that it really was a great entry and everything. And the characters being personal and everything versus, again, like the whole straight up, slasher sequel. I think that, some people, it's like a controversial sequel because you have like diehard Jason fans that, wanted to see Jason versus a lore movie. And I just want you to know that that's like one of my favorite entries into the series.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate that. And I got to tell you, what's so funny about people who have that feeling about the movie, I always tell them, you know what, go back and time out how much Hockey Mask is in the movie. And you'll find that I actually have more Hockey Mask in my movie than almost all the other Friday the 13th movies because there's a concentrated amount of time in the beginning and there's a huge amount of time at the end. Almost the entire third act is Jason. Is his mask, is him entirely. Not to mention all the times when his reflection shows up and you see the mask. So I was an uber fan of these movies, so I knew I can't get rid of the goddamn hockey mask. What I can do is give us a section of the film where we're waiting for it to come back. And so for me, my excitement was that I was going to get to have Jason explode back into the real world. And that was kind of what I was turned on about it. So there's still a ton of Hockey Mask. You are completely right in that that's what I was doing. I was making a lore movie. I was making a mythology film. And by the way, being compared to New Nightmare makes me very, very happy. Because New Nightmare is Wes's baby. Like that's the one he adored because he was telling the story he really wanted to tell. And honestly, taking a certain amount of the blame for unleashing this type of villain into modern culture, which is the anti-villain, meaning, nobody was going to see these movies because they were so in love with the heroes. They were going to see these movies to see the heroes get slaughtered. Wes did not understand that. He just didn't. That was like anathema to him, where it was like, wait a second. The monster isn't really scary anymore. The monster is like a joke. And that's so not Wes. So Wes wanted the monster to be a monster. I mean, you watch the first Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger is vicious and ugly and everything that's wrong. Yet that's the thing. And because they made him jokey by part 2 and so on, that became the icon and the reason why people went. So, which I get. And I love me some Freddy. I love all these characters, but I do get it. Like you watch the original, Texas Chainsaw, Toby wasn't trying to make Leatherface a folk hero. He was like, this is the monster, guys. This is the shark in the water, so. That's look, I truly appreciate the comparison. That's beautiful, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. I was actually talking to one of my friends. He's a couple years younger than me, and he's still like getting into all the Friday the 13th movies. And
sure.
I was like actually like explaining, pretty much like. The synopsis of each one to him, and that's exactly how I explained it to him. And once I explained it to him like that, he was like, "Oh, then I really got to check it out." So,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
So I definitely mean it. It's truly like because movies that I think delve into hell and the
Mm-hmm.
supernatural
Yep.
and stuff that really there's no limits to like the imagination with what you can work with,
Totally.
and that's why I'm definitely a huge Sam Raimi fan as well.
He's awesome.
And
He's
I've
awesome.
had
Sam was awesome.
yeah, I've had the chance to have Danny Hicks and Timothy Quill on my show,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working my way up to Bruce.
Love it.
You
Love
know, and Sam too.
it. Mm-hmm.
Say like his style is like so unique, and especially with his, I mean, like the whole process. I like how he does like the zoom in shots, with like the Evil Dead stuff and the whole
Totally.
like like build up. I mean, there's some very awesome stuff there, and he's very talented, and you are as well.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely. The question that I wanted to ask about in relation to the whole Freddy versus Jason thing, did you have a chance to pitch an idea to New Line about
I
a
did.
possible?
I did. And they loved the idea. The problem was that very soon after my movie is when Wes decided he wanted to make New Nightmare. And that's what stopped everything from moving forward when it came down to, to making that film. So Wes really wanted to do something else before they went and made Freddy versus Jason. And they were like, yeah, you're Wes Craven. You're going to do exactly what you want to do. So do it. And that's a big part of why it took so long for that film to happen. And by the time they came back around to it, I mean, look, let's be honest. I mean, Ronnie Yu he had never seen a Friday the 13th movie. So he really wasn't that concerned with what had come before. In fact, he kind of hated what came before. And was very open about that. I'm not telling tales out of school. Like, that's how he felt. So I get it. Like, that's where he comes from, and cool. But yeah, I don't think they were really all that interested in pursuing something that was going to be connected in some way to the Friday franchise. I think they were much more concerned with how it connected to Nightmare. And look, it's why Ronnie didn't even hire Kane Hodder to play Jason.
Okay, interesting. I'm curious. What was your pitch?
My pitch to it was that the opening of the film would have been a standard Nightmare on Elm Street dream sequence with a young kid stuck in Freddy's boiler room, and play, much like Jason Goes to Hell, play all of the tropes of the Nightmare series, like everything. Okay. And just as Freddy is about to take his kill on this kid, he gets punched right in the face by this huge meaty fist. And when he staggers back and looks up, there's Jason standing there in his boiler room. And the two of them just start kicking each other's asses. Meanwhile, this kid who's in the boiler room runs away, like is not killed. Okay. You got these two beasts just fucking going to town on each other, and suddenly you hear the world start to break apart and shake down, and you hear this screaming voice screaming, no. And the room literally splits in half. And suddenly these two guys are in the middle of an abyss standing on these sections of this boiler room, and you realize we're in hell. And this is their hell. This is what Freddy and Jason go through all for all time. Is this constant battle where nobody wins. And they decide that hell is too small for these two guys, and they're going to send one back. So a contest is made to go back up and collect particular souls, including Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street and Tommy from Friday the 13th. And these two guys show back up on our plane. Only one will win. Only one will stay here as Hell's assassin. The other will go to hell forever. And these two guys basically have to go after their prey. But the fun of it is that they can't let the other guy get them. So every time they get close, they are stopped by the other. And the other fun thing was that Creighton Duke is not dead. Creighton Duke is alive. He wears this back brace from the back breaking at the end of Jason Goes to Hell. And Creighton Duke is the one protecting Tommy and Nancy. And Tommy and Nancy, of course, the lore that we had built was that they had been together, that they were a couple, and they have a child. So it's Tommy, Nancy, and their child. So it was basically kind of going like, okay, how do we turn this into T2?
Right.
But with Freddy and Jason. But Freddy and Jason are on opposing sides because they can't let the other one get to these three characters. So, and we also wanted to sacrifice Tommy and Nancy, but save their child. That nobody gets the kid. And so that was sort of the structure of what we were pitching. And again, they fucking loved it. And then Ted Turner bought New Line. There was a moratorium on horror except for New Nightmare because it was Wes's. And 10 years later, they made Freddy vs. Jason. After over a dozen screenplays were written by different writers and different teams of writers. And, you know, my favorite thing about Freddy vs. Jason, the movie they made, is when Jason is taking a nap on the couch and the kids are all in a groupthink around a table, which I know was one of the development meetings at New Line. And we just recorded it. How do we kill Freddy and Jason? And literally, they just ran the scene as it went around the table at the development meeting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm definitely a fan of Freddy vs. Jason.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I thought it was really like the last installment.
Right, last hurrah for the two characters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it had, you know, that while it was still like the 2000s, it had, you know, that 80s, you know, like element to it. And, I mean, definitely the battle between Freddy and Jason at the end is pretty epic.
Yes, it is.
I would love to see more from both of the franchises if they can do it like in the vein of like how they rebooted like Halloween.
Sure.
You know, which seems to be like the way a lot of these franchises like seem to be going now.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome and everything, but at the same time, I'm also like, those were great franchises and everything, but let's allow like something new, you know,
mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. I think people are too obsessed with a bunch of movies that came out in the 80s and that it's taking up all the oxygen for new ideas. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think this stuff becomes parody of itself after a while.
Absolutely, because I was just about to say, you know, as much as like I appreciated the new Halloween, I had a lot of issues with it too.
Yes, I agree.
I thought they basically, you know, how are you going to not remake H2O? And after like kind of seeing the new one, I like H2O more than this one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I thought if you were going to go anywhere from like rebooting a franchise like that, you should go from number 2. Not disregard number 2. And
I agree with you. I totally 100% agree with you.
Because they also like ripped off like a lot of the shots from number 2 and mm-hmm. just called it like rebooting number 2. And I had a lot of issues with that because personally, number 2 is my favorite out of
franchise. Mm-hmm.
Michael Myers, because I'm one of those rare types that actually likes number 3 the best.
I think 3's great. I think 3's a great movie. It's a great movie. I think the problem with 3 is that they didn't put enough money behind it, so it feels like a TV movie.
Right.
But it's a great story. It is absolutely what John Carpenter wanted the series to be. And I think it's got some of the best concepts in it. I just think it's a super fucking cool movie. I agree with you. I think part 3 is great.
I think it's scarier than any of the Myers movies all put together. Also, it doesn't end on a good note at all.
No, it's terrifying.
You know, and it's one of those rare horror movies where, you know, evil wins.
Right.
You know, and that concept fascinated me.
Sure.
Because you don't see enough horror movies where evil wins, and I'm delving more into like the 90s here, but it's probably my all-time favorite Denzel Washington movie, and that's Fallen.
That's a terrific film. Absolutely terrific film.
The fact that you have like, you know, an age-old, you know, entity, basically a demon, you know, that loves the Rolling Stones and is basically like a serial killer.
That's great.
Is like, you know, that's amazing. And the way they did it as like a detective, like neo-noir kind of like feel. It's an awesome film. And, I think not enough people know about it, and also the fact that in that film it's actually told from the antagonist's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very interesting take that it might have been it's probably been done before, but that's the first circumstance that I can actually think of, seeing it at least in modern horror take.
Right. Yep. Totally agree.
Awesome. Well, we are actually just about out of time here. I have two closer questions for you.
Terrific.
And those are one is what are some of your favorite films, just in general? And
Okay.
The second is I know you mentioned the documentary project.
Yeah.
But if you have any other projects to promote.
Sure. So the first thing, for favorite films, I have very eclectic tastes. It's trust me, not going to be your usual horror movie Gump kind of stuff. My favorite film of all time is All That Jazz, Bob Fosse's movie. I think it's one of the bravest films a filmmaker's ever made, where the filmmaker completely exposed themselves to all their own foibles, and illustrated in a way that had energy and excitement. And it's a musical, and there's open heart surgery, and I mean, it's like it's as close to an American Fellini movie as we've ever had. It's just incredible stuff. When it comes to horror, look, nothing beats the classics. Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Halloween. These are all, The Shining, The Thing, incredible films. But I will say, I personally, for me, horror, I'm very rarely scared by things, and I'm very rarely moved by something in a way that I think horror movies should move us. For me, I love the 2008 version of Inside, the French film. I think this is one of the most remarkable feminist movies ever made and one of the greatest horror movies ever made. So I'm a giant fan of that film. I also think that Friedkin is, always applauded for The Exorcist, which he completely deserves because it's a masterpiece and probably the greatest horror film of all time. By the way, Jaws is a close second. Jaws is an incredible horror movie. But I think Cruising is a remarkable film, and I think it's a remarkable horror film. And it's one of those movies that gets overlooked a lot because of its subject matter, but that is a dangerous, dangerous movie. And, when you think Sean Cunningham is making Friday the 13th at the same time Friedkin is making Cruising, and Cruising is one of those films that I just wish we had an audience that was accepting enough, especially at that time. I think now people are way more accepting of subject matter, that was accepting enough to understand the idea of self-loathing that movie takes in, and the idea of the horror inside your own head. I think that movie's a masterpiece. So there's some of my favorites. By the way, Clockwork Orange all day long. But by the way, there's about 4 or 5 Kubrick movies that are just, that just make you want to go make a movie. The Star Wars films, there's just, here's the thing. When somebody asks me what my favorite movies are, I'm like, God, what did I see this week? Because you randomly forget things like The Godfather, and The Conversation, which I have a giant subway poster from New York of The Conversation in my home that's, over 8 feet tall. So there are so many films that I'm inspired by that I think are part of my lexicon. Pretty much David Cronenberg's entire horror library is incredibly inspirational. So yeah, I'm just a giant film nerd. I love movies. And I love all types of movies. When it comes down to what I got going on right now, well, a few years ago, I created a company called Skeleton Crew with my wife and writing partner, Deborah Sullivan, who is a genius in her own right, and she's a remarkable actor. And my best friend, a guy named Brian Sexton, who has been my producing partner for many years now. And the three of us created this company ostensibly to we have 3 divisions. We have a TV division. We have a larger budget division. We're making a big movie with Lionsgate that I can't talk about just now because we're just finishing up all our paperwork. But my favorite division of the company is our ultra low division, which is Skeleton Crew Extreme. And that is a place where we're kind of we posited the question, where did all the Roger Cormans go? And it's this idea of finding new voices or finding voices that have been around a while that have never gotten to tell the story they wanted to tell, and giving people the opportunity to tell those stories. And so the first movie out of the gate from that label was my film Secret Santa, which came out last year to some marvelous critical praise. We won a few festivals. We were in over 30 festivals around the globe. It was amazing. I mean, we were at Sitges, we were at Fright Fest Glasgow, Fright Fest London. I mean, it was just an amazing time with this movie. And that one will be streaming in October in the US. We've already sold all over the world, and it's available now on Blu-ray and DVD through Amazon and through our site, secretsantathemovie.com. But we have 3 movies we're making this year and a TV series. And I've never stopped making movies, man. Like, since I was 9 years old sitting in that movie theater, it's all I've ever wanted to do, and it's all I've ever done. I am lucky enough to have spent my entire life in the arts, and I've never lost my theater background. I still run a theater company, and I still run a troupe of actors that are 60 actors strong that all appear in my films that are brilliant, and you've seen all of them. They've all been on television shows and in movies and doing stuff, and that group of actors are my lifeblood. It's how I sustain myself is the talent that I get, that I'm lucky enough as a director to work with every single week. So, I'm actually going to be teaching a Zoom class in just a few hours to that group of people. We have so much coming, it's kind of overwhelming. And I will say the pandemic has been a fantastic time to actually just get a shit ton of writing done. I've written 2 movies and 2 episodes of television since we've been in the pandemic. So it's just been awesome. So I can't, while I am, my heart is breaking for the world as far as what is happening right now, from a creative aspect. If everybody can just stay in and do what, doctors and scientists tell us to do rather than what fucking politicians tell us to do, we can actually ride this thing out. And in the meantime, be creative and do some great work. So I've been very lucky to be able to do that. I feel very blessed to have had that opportunity. So that's us, man.
Awesome. I've definitely been doing the same with writing.
Nice.
Working on a vampire. Actually, I finished a vampire action thriller feature.
Nice,
and
man.
I'm with this whole pandemic thing going on. I was able. I'm kind of back to work now, but I'm almost done with the sequel.
Nice, dude.
I have a trilogy plan for it, and I feel like I have to tell you this before we end the conversation,
sure.
Because you said I'm talking to a horror icon film nerd here, and you mentioned Creepshow, and everything. Well, George Romero was my all-time favorite horror director writer.
Yeah.
And I live in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago, right before actually I started at Point Park for screenwriting, I was on the hunt for a new desk, basically to do my writing on. And my mom went to this estate sale that she really had no idea whose house it was, and it happened to be Christine Romero's house, and she got me George Romero's desk.
Oh my God, that's freaking awesome, dude. That's amazing.
And I've literally been writing, everything I've written as a professional, in school, and since has literally been on George Romero's desk. And I have actually a award-winning zombie comedy TV pilot that's it's published on Amazon.
Dude, that's awesome. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. And it's I feel like there's magic in the desk.
Yes, I would agree with that. Dude, he was one of the nicest men I've ever met. He was a lovely, sweet, wonderful dude.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Well, Adam, thank you so much. I just wanted to, relay that story to you real quick.
Absolutely, dude.
Um,
It's been a pleasure talking with you, brother.
Same here. Same here. Thank you so much.
You got it, dude.
All right. Bye.